I'm Louie Palmer and welcome to PlayBetterDrums.com and welcome to this Paradiddle fill idea lesson. There's going to be a few parts to this series and this idea was sent in by a member, a lesson request, and if you have lesson requests, please feel free to send them in, write comments underneath the videos, send an email, write in the forum, etc. And so today we're going to be dealing with this Paradiddle fill idea. This is one of the first ideas that came to me, and when the lesson request came in about how to use paradiddles in fills, I kind of thought to myself, well, I don't really use paradiddles that much in fills, and I find the basic sticking for a paradiddle a little bit square, because you often have that accent on the first note of each half. So if you can then obviously spread that around the toms, for example, that accent. But it's a little square sounding and I just don't really use that often. But then I remembered that there is one sticking that I like to use, well, one orchestration I should say, which is that sticking. We don't do an inversion, because often with paradiddle fills there'll be inversions, so you start the fill in a different place in the sticking, which we'll get to in other parts of this series. But the one that I use, which is the traditional sticking, is where we place the second note of each half. So the first half is going to be right left, and then the second half is going to be left right. That second note of each half gets placed on a tom. So the eventual orchestration is the one you saw at the beginning of the video, where I'm accenting the first note of each half as well on a cymbal and a bass drum on each half of the kit. But if I just play the sticking on the snare drum and then moving that one note to the tom, it sounds like this. So now play it a little slower. So that can be a cool fill idea on its own, because the accent pops out more than the first note does, because we're not really accenting the first note, the right and left of each half. So the accent kind of pops out and can trick the listener or trick your own ear as to that being the downbeat. So if you play just that in a short fill, that can be a nice fill with ghost notes built in, because we're playing the paradiddle sticking. And then if you speed it up, that's just doubling, so playing a 30-second note. So instead of So just doubling to 30 seconds, but then I'm playing that orchestration where I'm accenting the second note of each half. And that one does sound cool because it really pops out. And it's very simple idea, very simple sticking, but it's difficult to execute. You'll perhaps listen to it as I did when I was shown this and think, well, that's easy. Well, I'll just put the left hand here and the right hand here. But it's a really awkward thing to do, to push out, with your hands to toms for that second note and come back for the double. And still lock in with the quiet note with the downbeat, with the hi-hat. So once you've got that together, the general sticking and placing it around the toms, 16th notes, and then maybe you can double to 30 seconds if you're comfortable with it, then the original idea that I had, or that I was shown that I use sometimes for a big fill idea, maybe at the end of a song, or trying to find a place for it. It's not really going to be used everywhere, but it's something great to practice, is where we accent the first note of each half with a paradiddle. But now we're going to include that second note of each half on a tom. So once you are comfortable with the original idea just coming from the snare drum, once you involve the cymbals, that's really awkward. Just the way the arms have to move and your hands, it's really difficult. So you need to start super slow and just go as slow as you need to go so that you can get the sticking out continuously without stopping. Because once you get going, you then want to try and orchestrate it differently rather than the same pattern. So you can pick two toms to begin with, and then maybe these two, and then change it to these two. But then you want to eventually be able to improvise a little bit with it. And then also play it double up as 30 seconds, so we can play 16th notes. Which for this fill idea is a little slow, or 30-second notes. And if you were to use it in a more normal fill setting, you might, excuse me, you might want to only use it sparingly. So maybe at the beginning of a fill, or just a little bit, and then play something else to end. So the next thing we want to do is phrase this in a different note rate. So originally we were dealing with 16th notes and then doubling up to 32nd notes. And we can also phrase it in 16th note triplets. So the first thing to do is maybe play some single strokes in triplets, groups of 6 on the snare drum, and then play the paradiddle. So then I'm moving on to phrasing that second note of each half on the tom, but in triplets. So that's difficult to begin with. If you haven't done it before, you've really got to try and not listen to the toms because they stick out as accents and you want to hear that as the downbeat. But the quiet note you're playing to begin the pattern is the downbeat. So you've got to, in the triplet one, because the sticking is different in terms of what's lining up with the hi-hat, you need to go through the PDF if you're struggling with it and work out exactly what's falling with what hand notes falling with the left foot and the downbeat. And so this allows us to play the fill in different tempos. So originally we were playing a slower kind of groove and then doubling up to 30-second notes. And now the triplet one allows us to play a faster groove. So although you may or may not use this fill within a groove fill setting, it might just be something to practice, to have in your vocabulary, maybe to use at the end of a song as a big kind of fill idea. It's still good to be able to phrase it in different note rates so that you know where and where you can't use it, you know, what kind of tempo, and not think that, oh, I'm in this tempo, this is too fast to play that fill, this is too slow to play that fill. So practice it at the different note rates, just something fun to practice. We'll get to some other paradiddle ideas in the next lessons. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next lesson.